Hey, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to take a deep dive into Natasha Denona. Natasha Denona is an extremely popular brand created by a makeup artist who has a big presence at Sephora, but also at Ulta. I would even say perhaps now more at Ulta. And she has recently come out with a few new products, including a new liquid foundation and two new palettes. So today we're going to do an entire face of Natasha Denona and utilize the new products and highlight those and kind of go on a deep dive of Natasha Denona, where it was and where the brand seems to be going. So if that sounds good to you, then please consider liking, subscribing, and following along Unsolicited Advice on Instagram and on YouTube. So to begin, I've already done my brows, so I'm going to put on the Natasha Denona Hy-Glam primer. And this is a good glowy primer that I enjoy, and she has this in a bronzy color too if you are looking for something that was a little bit more summery. But I've always enjoyed this primer. It's not one of my all-time favorites, but it really does do a nice job of providing a base for your product to go to. So, like I said, the bulk of what we're talking about today is her new products that have recently launched. She recently launched her Hy-Glam foundation, or Hy-Glam foundation, sorry. You can see that glow. And I really have enjoyed it. I would say that it's not my favorite, but what it is a good long-wearing foundation that I would recommend to a variety of skin types. And then she recently came out with an extension of something that came out earlier this year. This was the Mini Eye Sculpt palette, and that came out earlier this year, and it was all mattes. And to kind of go off that, she's released two new palettes. This first one is the Natasha Denona Eye Sculpt Texture and Tone palette, and this is in the soft colorway. Lighter, more pinky, and it's a very interesting palette because if you go by the numbers where they normally have names on Natasha Denona, this one has different numbers and letters to go with cool tones, warm tones, peach undertones, etc. So this was the softer version, and it's 15 mattes and 3 metallics. And then this was the one called Dramatic, and this is the version that is for darker complexions, but it can be used for people who like a dark smoky eye like I do. And this one has 10 mattes and 5 metallics. So we're going to be looking at those today, and of course I'll throw the little videos of the swatches up in the corner. But my real focus is to kind of show you where the brand has been and where it's going. But before we go any further, let's go ahead, since we've already put that primer on, and start with some of the foundation. This came out in August, and I enjoy it a good deal. I have mine in the shade Neutral 3. And like I said, I find it to be a foundation that I could recommend to a lot of people, and it would work for them. It has a good medium coverage. It can build to full, and that's something that's really nice about it. And I wouldn't say that it has a glowy finish. It's going to have a glowier finish right now because I've got that primer on. But by itself or with a non-glowy primer, it's got more of a natural finish, which is nice. I'm not a huge fan of matte, and it's certainly not matte, but it's certainly not as glowy as some other foundations that are on the market right now. So you can see it gives a nice coverage. That light is so bright. I wonder if that's giving me weird shadows. Okay, so what we have here, as you can see, is a beautiful glow, but it's nothing too severe. You know, she used to have foundations and products back in the day, and people really didn't like her old foundations. And so people have really jumped on this Hy-Glam collection, and she's got quite a few products in that series. The next one she has also came out earlier this year, and it's the Natasha Denona bronzer, and this is a liquid bronzer, and I have mine, let's see, in the shade, is it Foxy? It says Foxy. I'm gonna have to get a magnifying glass. This is where we're at in life now. This is a very pigmented but very blendable bronzer, and once it goes on, it sets. I think that people like this product a good deal, and it's certainly something that I think would work for a great deal of people. And you know, that's kind of where I'm going with today. It seems like Natasha Denona is going in a direction to where it's going to work for a great number of people. That can be good and that can be bad. For people like me who have pretty much every palette she's ever put out, I don't have the first two, those two 28 pan palettes. I don't have those. And I don't have all of her mini 5 pans. But I have all of her older size, larger ones, and all of her middies. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of some of, you know, my favorites and the reason why I love them so much. For instance, this is the Metropolis palette. This is a palette that Natasha did, oh, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. The quality is still incredible. But look at the variety you get in there, from the bright blues to the reds to the greens to the golds, beiges, orange. This is such a good fall palette. And it's what we came to love about Natasha. You know, you may not always love the palette, the color choices, but you had a variety. Circo Loco, think back to that. Think back to the tropical one that she had, and things like this where they had a variety of looks, the pastel palette. Then a couple of holidays ago, she came out with the retro glam palette, and some people really liked it. I did, and some people did not. But you see, it's got taupes, silvers, creams, pinks, and greens of various depths. So you could get some really cool, interesting looks, and it would force you out of your comfort zone. A fun palette that I love by Natasha Denona is the Xenon palette. This came out 2 holidays ago, and it's monochromatic. It's all black and white, but there's little touches of blues, grays, and even kind of a pinky white in here, and it really forces you out of your comfort zone. Earlier this year, she came out with the Mini Gloom, and I cannot wait until this is turned into a midi palette, because as you can see, you've got pinks, you've got greens, browns, silvers, so it's a really cool palette. However, let's take a minute to look at a classic. This is the Natasha Denona Glam palette, and you can see in here that there's pinks, browns, dark chocolates, creams, golds. This is a bestseller for Natasha Denona. It's a classic palette, and I think a lot of people really love it. But you still had a variety of looks you could get from it. Now, let's look at some of her other palettes that have come out. Some are older, and then some are relatively new. There was the Biba palette, which for a long time was her sort of most neutral palette until these new palettes just launched. But it has the browns, the grays, the creams, black, and a lot of things that are included in the new palettes. Then we started to go into the I Need a collection. So we had I Need a Nude palette, which I absolutely love. But this one, as you see, has a lot of different depths, but it's pinks, beiges, browns, tans, with some interesting finishes, and I really love that one. Coming to complement that, we had I Need a Warm, which is essentially the same palette, but with warmer tones, browns, more orange leaning, warmer, toastier, but there's a duochrome in here. But as you're seeing, these palettes are becoming more and more difficult to make different looks. They're so tightly collected that you start to wonder, where did that originality, or where did that excitement, those bold colors, even the palettes people didn't necessarily like Zendo. You had light, cool colors on one side, you had dark, deep, warm colors on the other, and it forced you out of your comfort zone. The gold palette was a classic of hers, and yeah, it was mostly gold, but it had beautiful turquoise on the corner, if you remember, and mustards. When it was re-released as the golden palette, almost every look you're going to get with this palette is going to come out looking like a variation of itself because it's so tight. And then even earlier this year, what we were hoping would be a colorful, fun palette, the Bloom palette, gave us this really tight, concentrated color story. And so that's not even counting the little 5 pans. You have the one that I mentioned earlier, which laid the foundation for these. But you've also got Mini My Dream, which somehow took all the fun out of My Dream and just found the browns. And Mini Starlet. These incredibly tight color stories that lean into the nude realm. And I'm guessing that's what Natasha's doing now. I'm hoping for the holidays, maybe we get something different. There's rumors that there could be a neon palette coming. But she keeps releasing these palettes of taupes, browns, coppers, beiges, very tight color stories. And I'm wondering if that's to attract a new client. But for those of us who collect Natasha Denona, we have these colors 100 times over. And so when I see things like the two new palettes, of course they're beautiful. Nobody questions the Natasha Denona formula. But you do sort of wonder, where's the artistry going? And for many people, if you look at something like the Soft palette, which in theory would represent my skin tone, you may not want to do a full yellow look. Like, these are divided by undertones. So this is more designed for a makeup artist, but yet it's at a price point that's at Ulta or Sephora. So I do kind of wish, like, I'm glad we have this, but we have so many neutral palettes now from Natasha Denona. So I'm hoping that some of the fun comes back, because that's something that you love, that we love about Natasha Denona. So I'll get off my little soapbox for a second and put on my Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer. I think at one point Natasha had an eyeshadow primer. She may still, but I just have always really loved the Rare Beauty one, and so that's the one that I use, and it works really well with pretty much every eyeshadow that I have in my collection. It doesn't matter what brand it is. Let's bring you down just a little bit. No, down. No, not that far down. Only seeing my crotch. Okay, so let's look at these new palettes. So first we have the I Need... See, I was about to say I Need a Nude, because it looks like some of those I Need a palettes. But this is called the Natasha Denona Eye Sculpt Texture and Tone. And this is in the soft version. And it has a rose, a peach, yellow undertones, cools, warms, and neutral cools. And it's got 3 sort of shimmers in it. But as you can see, it goes from lightest to darkest in each row, but it's incredibly tight. And even the shimmers, 2 of the 3 shimmers that are in here are almost the same color. One's a little more brown, but they're both incredibly dark. There is an inner eye color that's a shimmer, but, you do wonder if many of the looks you're going to get from this palette are not going to look identical. So I'm going to start, and I think what I'm going to do today on this eye is a more rosy look. So I'm going to stick with the roses and peaches and then maybe try to use the metallic as I can. But let's bring you in a little closer. No, I don't want that. I wish this thing listened better. Okay. Okay, now you can go down a little. Nobody wants to see all my business. Okay. Maybe even a little closer. Okay. So on this eye, I'm going to start with R1, Rose 1. So the lightest rosy color. This is really struggling to find me today. Okay. So as you can see, it's a very light, pinky, peach kind of color. Very nice. And the point of this palette and the point of the little 5-pan, which I love the little 5-pan, is to create shape and definition to the eye. I use the little 5-pan all the time with like single shadows or sticks, but this is just kind of an expansion of that. And I see the point, but again, if you're, say, one skin tone, aren't you going to lean into the undertone that best represents you? And then you've got the rest of the palette that you may not use very often. I got my coffee because my throat hurts today. I hope I'm not getting sick. Okay, so we put down R1. So now I'm going to go into R2, and this is on a rougher Shadow 2. And I'm going to put this all over the lid. Now she has some silky mattes in here, and then she has what she calls kind of her slip cream mattes, which are more like less pigmented, but they're easier. They're like for liners. She used to have them and they were her cream to powder mattes, but she's kind of gone into this slip cream formula now. I like it, but a lot of people don't. Now R3 is the darkest in the Rose series, so I'm going to go over here and put that in the corner. And as you can see, even that at its darkest is not terribly dark. So I want to deepen that up a little bit, and I have to go to a different undertone. So I'm going to go with Cool 3, which seems to be the coolest, darkest color outside of black. I get that there is a heavy need for these. I really do. But is your average consumer going to spend a lot of time shaping and defining their eyes? I don't know. I would think one thing that Natasha does so well is color and curation. And so I would think that that would be something that she'd want to lean into. But like I said, perhaps for the holidays we'll get something. Now, if you didn't want to use any of the metallics that are in this palette, that's pretty much it. Because the metallics that are in this palette, there's a very dark brown, there is a coppery brown, and there is a shimmery white. I'll show you them right here. These are the only metallics that are in this palette. So I'm thinking I'm going to use these two today because that's incredibly dark. Especially for something called the soft palette. So let's go ahead and put this brown color on the outer portion here. I did notice from Morgan Turner on her page, she did a little demonstration with this kind of cream colored one, and it really had trouble sticking to some of the powders. So you want to be careful. And if you really want a lot of impact, of course you would want to use like a Pat McGrath Intensify wand. So that's a pretty basic eye. I get it. I get it. But it is still a basic eye. And you can see there's a little bit of fallout there. Okay, so I'm going to go back in with R2 and reintroduce some of that pinky rosy color. That is a pretty color, and even R3 a little bit on this outer portion of my crease. So let's go ahead and try the Natasha Denona concealer under the eye. Now I have two shades. I have R2, which is my brightening shade, and R Neutral 3, which is sort of my everywhere else shade, correcting shade. So I'm going to grab the lightest one right now, and I tend to put that right over where my dark circles are, or my dark pits of despair, as Not Fit for Print Beauty would say. And then I put the other one, farther away from the inner part of my eye. Let me grab a little brush for that. And as you can see, that is a very bright shade. I use it as just for that, just for brightening. But I will go back in with my foundation and help blend the two together. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and grab some of that R3 rosy color and run that along the bottom here. It's a pretty color. Is it in the Retro palette? Yes. Is it in Retro Glam? Yes. Is there something kind of like it, I guess, in my dream? Probably. But it is very nice. You even see the metallic here is not her super shiny, wah kind of formula. It's a very subtle one. I'm going to grab a little bit of it, of that metallic shade, and just put it on the inner corner here. And you can see you've got yourself a pretty basic, simple look. And I guess that would work for a great number of people. But again, for people like me who are collectors, we have these colors. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're a Natasha Denona collector, you're going to get these anyway. And of course, they're wonderful quality. But is it going to provide you something that you don't already have from the brand? No. I'm going to go in with one of Natasha Denona's liners that came out earlier this year. And I do really like her liners. Where did I put it? Now see, I am at the point now where I am losing my mind a little bit. This one came out with the Mini Gloom, and this is the Macrotech Crayon, and this is in the color Taupe. And I have used this a lot. I really hope that we get a midi size of that Gloom palette, because that's when I love Natasha the most, when she forces me out of my comfort zone. It looks really nice. I love that liner. It's just the perfect kind of cool tone brownie gray. And I'm just going to throw on a little bit of, I don't have any Natasha Denona mascara, so I'm just going to grab a little bit of the brown Lisa Eldridge one, because since this is a soft look, brown of course is going to be a little bit softer than doing a black. And so as you can see, it's a beautiful look. But is it groundbreaking? No. And that's what I really like about Natasha and Pat and people like that, is when they have introduced colors and concepts into their makeup collection that I'm not used to. Okay, so we have the other eye, and for that we're going to use the Dramatic palette. Now this one, to me, looks like I Need a Warm met the Bronze palette. It's very similar to the Bronze palette and I Need a Warm. There are some beautiful purple in here you see over here, but that's found in the bronze palette too. So this one is for darker complexions, for those who want something smokier and more dramatic. And like I said, this one does have 5 metallics, so I like that. The one thing I don't particularly like in here is there's not an inner eye color. Maybe one of the metallics could be used, but they're all very golden. So I'm going to start by laying down a base. And I'm going to start with R1. And that's actually pretty good because this one really leaned heavy on the rose. So we're going to try the rose, but for the darker palette, the dramatic palette, if you will. This is probably the more bang for your buck palette because you can definitely get dramatic looks. But all the colors, for the most part, do appear like they would be in other Natasha palettes. They really do look like shades that are found in gold, bronze, and I Need a Warm. I guess if you don't have those, this would be a great, alternative. Okay, so let's go into R3, which is the dark shade here, slightly darker. As you can see though, this is the darker shade and the depth level is not that different. And that's something that is a little odd with this dramatic palette, is the depth differential between the lightest and the darkest in most of these cases is not very much, there's not much difference. Like I'm going to have to add something darker over here to get true depth. For that, I'm going to go in with C1, which is a very neutral, dark brown. It looks to me like Midnight Sun from Pat McGrath, which is one of my favorite. Not Midnight Sun, what's it called? It's the dark brown that's in Mothership 10. I have to think about that one for a minute. It'll come to me. But it reminds me a lot of that shade, and that's one of my favorite dark brown shades. There is a brown in Midnight Sun that's similar to this, but this one reminds me of whatever that darkest brown is that's in Mothership 10. Okay, so we've got some serious depth there. So I'm going to go in and do C2, which is this beautiful purple shade. And this is actually kind of interesting because it's the only shade in here that's not like a straight up neutral. So we'll see how this applies. It's a little patchy. I don't know if it's reacting to what's underneath it. It's certainly, I certainly can get it to work, and it's beginning to look really beautiful, but it does require a little bit of work. It has a beautiful shade though. And it doesn't appear that there's any fallout really. So that's cool, especially with a darker shade like that. On the inner corner, let's see, do we want to do, which of these do we think would look best with this look? I think this is too dark. And I think this is too yellow. So I think what I'm going to go with is Y2. So let's try that. And with Natasha Metallics, you can use a brush or you can use your finger. Okay, that is a gorgeous combination. Like you can see how the two blend right there in the center. Okay, you really can get something pretty cool with this palette. Let's go back with the concealer and do the same thing we did on the other, which is I put the lighter color over here. And then I put darker towards the outer portion of the lower eye. You could get really smoky and dramatic with this palette. You can't get much light out of it though. And one thing I will say is I kind of wish that that white color that's in the soft palette, that the glittery one I used on the lid here, was repeated in this palette or something similar, because there's not really an inner eye color here for somebody of my skin tone. Obviously, if you have a darker skin tone, you could use one of them, but for me, I think that would just be a little bit too dark, because the lightest shade in here is still a gold, but we'll try it. So I'm going to grab a little bit of, I think it's Warm 2, and just put a little of that on my inner corner. And it works, don't get me wrong. But I normally like something a little bit brighter there. It's very pretty though. Okay, on the bottom, I'm going to grab some of that R3. Somebody once told me that they didn't think Natasha Denona shadows worked well with natural hair brushes, unlike say Pat McGrath, where I think they really do benefit from natural hair brushes. But I've never really noticed a difference. I've always found that they work very nicely with it, so I'm not really sure if that's true or not. I'm going to grab a little bit of that C1, that dark brown color, just for this outer corner here. Okay, so that's very pretty. So as you can see here, we have two very different looks, something very soft and ethereal, something very dramatic. That's what Natasha Denona wanted with these palettes, because if you're of a light skin tone, you should be able to use both of them, but you're just going to get different, you're going to achieve different things. Now I'm going to grab that same taupe liner from Natasha. She's had some really cool colors of these over the years. I know that the greens that came with Yucca, which is one of my all-time favorite Natasha palettes, and also had a variety of different looks you could achieve. Came with some really cool liners. This one over here is beautiful. It reminds me a lot of a look that I can create using the bronze palette. So if you have that palette, you may not necessarily feel like you need this one. Now, since this one's more dramatic, let's go in with Lisa Eldridge Black. I would say if you're looking to save money, or you don't want to buy, a lot of repeats, I would say if you have I Need a Nude, you have this, and I actually think you have more. I think that's such a gorgeous palette. And there's so many cool finishes in there that this one just doesn't have. This one's much softer. If you have bronze, then you have a lot of what this palette offers. But if you don't have those, or you're looking for something that you can create a look with and then throw like a one sparkly topper over, then these are really nice. I'm not talking about the quality here. I just kind of miss fun Natasha. So let's go back out a little bit. That thing is going to be the vein of my existence today. And you can see I'm doing laundry back there. So we've already got the bronzer on. So for the blush, I'm going to go to the Natasha Denona My Dream Trio. And the Natasha Denona My Dream collection is my favorite Natasha Denona palette. It came out, I think, 3 years ago for the fall. And even it had a variety of different looks you could get from it. Pinks, oranges, things like that. But I'm just going to grab the cream blush that's in here, which I really like. It's just a nice neutral blush. I like these trios. She's done these before. She did one for the gold palette, which I didn't like as much because it was just highlighters. But she's done them for, there was a cranberry one that had liners in it as well, or had blushes and highlighters. And that's my favorite. She also came out a few years ago with those like high-gen face palettes. I never got any of those because the reviews were not great, but I love these. So I'm going to try the Natasha Denona. This is the High Gen. She doesn't call it. She calls it a beautifier. It's a really beautiful cream highlighter. Very blingy. So I'm going to take some of that, and I have mine in the shade Light. And I'm just going to put some of that up here. And you can see right off the bat, it is blingy. But it does give you that kind of glow. And there's not any real visible particles in it. And that's something I really like about this product. So I'm kind of wondering if this is the direction she's going to go with her brand, or if she's going to try to meet in the middle. I hope she tries to meet in the middle and give those of us who collect new and exciting, and then those that want the basics to have those too. What I really want, Miss Natasha, is for you to come out with a 15-pan MIDI of your old, coveted, everybody wants, that 5-pan blue palette. I would love to see your take, like you did last year with Roxa, on purple, on blues and grays. I think it would be so cool, and I would love to see that. Now for the lip, I'm going to go in with the Natasha Denona My Dream Lip Trio, and this is in the shade Natasha. It's one of my favorites. It's just it's this and like Pat McGrath's Nude Venus. Those are two that I, they never fail. So there's also the lipstick. The packaging for these I think has changed since this, but these are part of the permanent line. And it's just the perfect cooler toned. I think Nude Venus from Pat is maybe a little warmer, but cooler toned neutral. And really amp it up here with a little bit of her gloss. And I really like her gloss too. I like that trio a lot. And sometimes she runs a package deal on that on the website. So we've got an entire face today with Natasha Denona, and like I said, I really like the products, and I like both of these palettes. I'm just hoping Fun Natasha does come back for the holidays, maybe 1 or 2 a year. Where's Yucca? Where's Roxa? Where's Circo Loco? Where are those really fun, exciting palettes that we love and collectors love and that push us out of our comfort zones? But these are beautiful nonetheless. 2 very different looks, one with each palette. So if you like this kind of content, then I really would appreciate if you, I know I get a lot of viewers, but I don't always get people who subscribe. So if you would please subscribe, consider shopping my links. It doesn't cost you anything, but it kind of helps out my little channel. And then follow along on YouTube, Instagram, etc. Unsolicited advice. I hope this has been helpful for you. And if you're new to Natasha Denona, then hopefully it's given you some ideas. And if you're a longtime fan like me, I hope it's been kind of a walk down memory lane. Beautiful looks nonetheless. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.